Welcome back to another week of Instigating with Clarkey and Drury, with myself, Ryan Drury, Chris Clark. We're brought to you, as always, by our friends at Conway Furniture, our friends at Larry Hudson, Chevrolet Buick GMC, of course, the Listowel Squash Courts. And we're joined by two of our favorite guests on the show, a guy that we've bugged 100,000 times to come on. He's back, Steve McAllister of Gaming News Canada, and of course, our friend, longtime umpire. Both these guys, longtime journalists, too. Keep that in mind. And that's why they're arguably better on this show than we are. Jim Cressman joining us as well. Gentlemen, how are you?
I'm fantastic, Ryan. Yeah,
awesome.
Yeah, hey, great to be here with Jim. We haven't seen each other in probably 25 or 30 years, so it's an honor and a pleasure to be on the screen with him. Not so much for you two guys.
Well, all right,
that's you guys.
That's fair.
Before we get going, can I bring up the elephant in the room?
Please.
Because the last time we were on, playoffs hadn't started yet. So yes, Clarkey, my Bruins are out there golfing with your Leafs.
Yes, they are. You were pretty vocal on your Facebook for quite a while, and then all of a sudden you were silent. So anyway, but then but then all of a sudden Angel Hernandez came up, and I sent you a couple of things that you didn't respond to. He's finally retired in my eyes. Let's get right into this. In my estimation, thank goodness this guy's out of baseball. Jim, I know you have a lot to say on it.
I will just say this. There are a few. Angel, I think, ended up being vilified by so much on social media and stuff like that. But there's a few others in the major leagues that I think should be retiring too. And for some reason, they seem to be able to get away with their poor plate work. That's what I'll say about that. But we can get into more about Angel as well. But I think it came down to, well, I know a little bit of the inside stuff. Angel was, I don't think it got out, though, that he was basically suspended. Major League Baseball, his last game was May the 9th. Major League Baseball said, you're not meeting standards right now. We're going to suspend you. And then they got into discussing bio package. And it took 2 weeks. He got a pretty good package. And I think this was probably going to be his last year anyway. But when they approached him with that, I think he realized it was time to go. You know, he started out as a pretty good umpire. At one time, he was a really good umpire. He's a really nice guy. He's involved with a lot of charities. He does that umps care, where the umpires, when they're in major league towns, they're always in major league towns, but when they're in towns where there's a children's hospital, they will take teddy bears and go and see the kids at the children's hospital and that sort of stuff. Angel's been very involved with that. But I think just over the years, there was some bitterness. Joe Torre, I'll just say this, Joe Torre was screwing him. When Joe Torre moved into the Major League Baseball office and became director of operations or whatever his title was, he basically just decided to blacklist whatever Angel, because back when Torre was in LA, they had an incident and he just hated Angel. And I can't prove it, but that's the speculation there, is that Torre, because Angel had worked 2 World Series right after he had joined the Major League staff, and he'd done a really good job. And then all of a sudden he wasn't getting World Series. He wasn't getting promotion to crew chief, that sort of stuff. And that all came under Joe Torre. And Joe Torre has never liked umpires, but anyway.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can join a long list of other people, I guess. And, you know, Steve, I'm curious what your reaction was when you heard that Angel Hernandez was going to step aside. I mean, he certainly, and Jim, to his credit, is right. I mean, he was a good umpire. He was considered a very good umpire when he first cracked the major leagues, and really didn't kind of become this social media villain and became so vilified until a little later on, really the last 10 to 15 years. Just watching his career unfold and some of the odd ups and downs he got involved in. What was your reaction when you heard the news, Steve?
Yeah, I think, Angel Hernandez became an easy target because of social media. And it's like the old Morton Salt commercial, right, guys? Like, when it rains, it pours. And this guy just couldn't catch a break. I think Jim, too, if I remember correctly, he was also serving Major League Baseball, was he not?
Yeah, well, it was over the Joe Torre stuff about him not becoming a crew chief, not getting World Series assignments, that sort of stuff, and he compiled a long list about discrimination. The judge that had appeared before obviously was not an Angel Hernandez fan because he quickly dismissed it, which was really weird that it was dismissed so basically summarily without even going anywhere. But and that probably didn't help Angel's cause either by suing MLB.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll say too, guys, is I just think it's tough to be an official these days in any sport because we, as fans, we get to watch 27 different replays of a thrown pitch or a penalty call in a hockey game or a foul call in an NBA game. And these games happen so fast. And Jim will know from umpiring, pitchers throw a lot hard, consistently harder now than they did back in the days in Jim's prime as an umpire. And it's a tough job.
So, having said that, Steve, how can they change things? How can the sports change how these games are officiated? I've always said I think one referee in hockey should be upstairs and one on the ice. Baseball, I'm praying for the day that we get the robot umpire to call balls and strikes. Sorry, but I am. I just think it's such an integral part of baseball to get that part of the game called correctly every single time. And yes, I know the box is different and on the broadcast, but we've seen the social media posts of umpires who miss calls like 5, 6, 7 inches outside, down, high, whatever. But let's start with hockey, Steve. You were an NHL, or not an NHL official, but you were a hockey official. Can they do anything to change things?
Well, to play devil's advocate to what you said, Chris, what I will say is that, there is a human element to the sport, a big human element. I had this argument with a guy years ago when I was going to the university in Toronto. And, if Wayne Gretzky missed a breakaway, like shoots the puck 5 feet wide of the net, he didn't get a do-over on a breakaway. So why would the best athletes in the sports don't get a do-over when they screw up? But a referee misses a call in the game, and it's the worst possible thing that could happen in a game. Now, having said that, I've come around a little bit. I think to your point about balls and strikes, I'll defer to Jim on how good the technology is now. But if there is technology out there that can absolutely get balls and strikes 99.9% right all the time, I would say, yeah, that would be a good change. And I think that there's merit to what you suggest, maybe putting a second referee upstairs. But again, I think what's happened in hockey is you have referees are asked to call the games to a certain standard. Unfortunately for the referees and the teams, the players, those standards seem to change over the course of a season, and especially in the playoffs. And I've argued for a long time, and I'll always defend the officials as much as possible. But I think it's really hard to be an NHL referee when the standards change. It seems almost every day there's a new standard. And I've seen a lot of really, really good NHL referees over the last 10 or 15 years, and I see them make or not make a penalty call, and I'm wondering how could they not call, or how could they call that penalty? And I really believe it's because NHL hockey ops has way too much sway over how games are officiated today.
Yeah, it's an interesting point too. And, when you speak about the hockey thing, we got a great example of it in game 1 of the Stanley Cup final. There were a number of what was described on the broadcast on either side of the border as kind of innocuous contact, one between Sam Bennett and Connor McDavid, and one later on between Bennett and Evander Kane. Neither one of those were called, and both of them occurred in the first and second period, respectively. And then in the third period, one of the Oilers players, I believe it was Matthias Janmark, got called for a far softer one, and everybody was upset because all of a sudden it was called. But in the first 2 periods where the infraction was worse than what occurred there, he gets called for a really key penalty as Edmonton was trying to build momentum down to nothing. And it took some of their best players off the ice. So, it is confusing, and it does make fans wonder often, Steve, where this standard is coming from and why it seems to feel that it does change so much.
It's funny, Ryan. The last couple of weeks, I've thought a lot about this, and it probably took me longer for me to understand this, and that won't surprise Clarkey. But the NHL's in the entertainment business, and for the NHL, violence sells, and so people love a great body check that lies a guy out and a guy staggering to the box. They love the fighting. Last night's game, in the first 5 minutes, Adam Henrique hit a Florida defenseman from behind in the boards.
Ekman Larson.
Which was a blatant boarding, hitting from boarding penalty, whatever you want to call it, that didn't get called. And the referee was standing. I can't remember if it was O'Rourke or I think Hebert was the other guy. What guy worked the game last night? We're right there and saw it and didn't call it. And then a couple of minutes later, the first part of the game I thought was a little bit soft compared to that Henrique hit. But I think the NHL's in selling violence as part of the game. And we heard Brad Marchand say in the first round of the playoffs that everybody's out there trying to hurt each other. And the NHL they're going to feed into that.
So, something that Steve brought up was how the standards change as the season goes along and then into the playoffs. And I think the NHL needs to explain this, be more open. The National Football League, during the season, if they start changing how they're making some calls, they will explain that. The NFL will put out a media release on it saying this is how we're calling this now, like the encroachment at the line, that sort of thing. If the player is a foot in, and because they had so many of those calls, so the NFL has come out and they've explained that stuff. The NHL seems to be very guarded on this, and I don't know why they keep it such a secret. It's even when they do the replay on the goals and stuff like that, all the referee says is we have goalie interference, we have no goal, or after review, we have a goal. Well, they don't explain why. The NFL officials will stand there and explain what their call is and why it's been made that way. And I think that's where the NHL is really falling down.
Yeah, I think,
and baseball to a certain extent too. The baseball umpires haven't got to the point now where they're explaining a rule. Like if something happens in a rule interpretation or whatever, the umpires, they're mic'd to the crowd, they're mic'd to the TV audience. They should be explaining that stuff. It's going to do nothing but help the game and help the fans understand what's going on, and they owe it to the fans.
Yeah, it feels to me, guys, like the Department of Player Safety with the NHL is almost like it's an oxymoron. And in the case of the NHL, cross-checking is allowed now. I think charging's been completely removed from the rule book. Yeah. You see what Bennett did to Marchand with that forearm shiver in the first round. And again, that was a real. I don't blame the referees for missing that call, but I don't know how there wasn't some kind of supplementary discipline for that hit, because Marchand was obviously seriously hurt by that. So they don't call the real egregious serious stuff. But then you shoot the puck over the glass. That's an automatic 2-minute penalty.
Yeah.
You get your stick up like that on a guy's hand. That's an automatic hook.
Mm-hmm.
And Jim, you remember from your years covering hockey, junior hockey and senior hockey back in the 80s. The stick or the shin pad or the hockey pants, you probably weren't going to call a penalty. And so I just, again, there's a real double standard with the NHL, I think you got to try to make the game as safe as possible for players. And I just don't think that's being done in the NHL. And again, I think it's because of the violence sells entertainment component.
Yeah, and Steve, we're chatting with Steve McAllister of Gaming News Canada and longtime umpire and journalist Jim Cressman, and we're just kind of having a bit of an officiating forum here. And on that note, I'd love your take on this, Steve. And we've asked you something similar to this before, but obviously you have a lot of experience and worked obviously very closely with for a number of years the NHL Players Association. And I think that gets left out of this conversation a lot of the time. And Jim, I would imagine baseball is no different. People often forget that the players have a role in this, and they have guys that are part of the competition committee. I believe every team elects one guy to have a voice on behalf of the franchise, and they play a role in this specifically when it comes to that supplemental discipline. The people often wonder why there's a max fine of like $5,000 for something. Suspensions generally start at 1 to 3 and get more severe depending who the player is or how they feel on that particular day. At least it feels that way. It's the players have, stipulations within the CBA that they want to stick to. They don't want fines that high. So in the future, and I'd like both your takes on this. I'll start with you, Steve. How much of a role do the players need to start to play in terms of making this make more sense?
Yeah, they need to play a larger role, Ryan. But I don't think they do, because they like that violence side of the sport, and they're, I think, again, to me, it's not just a coincidence that the guy in charge of suspensions for the NHL is George Parros, and we all know what kind of player George Parros was during his career. And it's not Paul Kreider, or it's not Wayne Gretzky, or it's not Teemu Selanne who's running player or handing out suspensions, because I think if it was and they had autonomy, it'd be a different story. And again, don't be fooled for 1 second that George Parros has autonomy when it comes to handing out suspensions. I mean, Gary Bettman, Bill Daly, Colin Campbell. There's a lot of people with their fingers in the pie on that one. But the players are just as culpable. And again, I've thought for a long time, anybody plays hockey day, you grew up wearing a full face shield. So why wouldn't you play in the NHL wearing a full face shield? And that's the players. They don't want that. And the players fought really hard not to even have, to not have just the half shield. They want to have that ability to not wear a half face shield. So yeah, the players have a say in this, and their opinion is like we like the game to be rough and tough, and we're on board with that.
Jim?
Of course, baseball, they've taken the rough and toughness out of it. You can't take out the second baseman anymore. It's like baseball, I think, has really gone too far on some of the stuff as far as the entertainment factor is concerned, because I'm not saying you try to kill the second baseman or the shortstop to break up a double play, but that was always part of the game, and the players accepted it. And then all of a sudden they changed, and now they're getting you can't even have your foot blocking second base, or it's being called interference. Mm-hmm. I think they're going way too far or overboard on some of the baseball stuff. And I think it's because you got a lawyer as the commissioner, Rob Manfred. Manfred isn't a baseball guy, but he's already announced his baby was the robotic umpire. Clarkey, you mentioned you can't wait for that to happen. I'm really wondering if it ever is going to happen. They're still testing it in AAA. I think this is the third year now, and Manfred has already announced that or said that it won't be in the major leagues next year. They're not happy with the. They've done everything they possibly can to shorten the games. I think once you bring the robotic umpire thing in, that's now going to start to lengthen the games again, because you're going to have challenges on what the robot is called. Also, too, the thing they've found in AAA, and the AAA umpires just decided, until they were told, no, you can't do that. If a ball hit the ground, bounced through the strike zone, it'd be told strike in the earpiece. So they just ring it up, because
yeah, but you got to have a guy behind the plate anyway to make that call. Like you're
still going to have a guy behind the plate.
Exactly.
Because you're going to have check swings, you're going to have fair ball, that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But the balls and strikes are going to come down to the robot. But they're still running into a lot of issues with that system. So I don't know. And the umpires, you know what? The umpires have always said, hey, bring it on. It makes our job so much easier. It's the same as the replays on the bases. But you know what? Everybody said, well, the umpires don't care now because they know they're going to get it right on the replay. They do care, because if they start having a low grading on overturned calls, then they're not getting the postseason assignments. And postseason assignments, of course, means extra money. So they still want to try to get it right the first time. They're just not out there coasting. So I don't know how the robot thing is going to do. I've talked to some umpires that know some AAA umpires, that these are former AAA guys, and they said there's just a lot of glitches. Some nights the signal will fail and they don't get anything. So at least they're there. They can still make the call. And
Right.
they're still actually on the AAA now plays a 6-game series. 3 games are done with the robotic umpire. The other 3 games are done with the plate umpire calling balls and strikes. Because that same plate umpire might be called up two days later as a vacation replacement or an injury replacement in the major leagues. And if he hasn't had to call balls and strikes all year, he's going to be lost when he gets up to the major leagues. So they still got a long way to go on that.
I want to go back to what Steve said about Brad Marchand and Sam Bennett's punch that was undetected for a while. Do you think, because we saw it with the Leafs, like Brad Marchand got cross-checked in the face twice within 10 seconds playing the Leafs. I think it was Jake McCabe got fined $5,000 for that cross-check. It should have been a suspension. There's no doubt in my mind. I don't even think he got a penalty. Anyway, how much is it because that was Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett didn't get suspended?
You would hope it wouldn't be a factor.
I know.
It shouldn't be. But again, I don't know what happens within hockey ops, and if it was a case of if Bennett had done that to Pasternak, for example, maybe it is different because it's not Brad Marchand. I mean that shouldn't be.
It shouldn't.
That should not be the determining factor. But again, like how often do we see a match penalty called in an NHL game, and how often do we see infractions that should be match penalties, especially in the playoffs? A lot, right?
Oh,
and I
absolutely.
The thing that really disturbed me was the fact that Marchand felt comfortable enough to say in that media scrum that we're out there trying to hurt each other in the playoffs. And I don't know, guys, if I've ever heard that in another sport. We're taping this about 3 hours after I watched Scotty Scheffler win the Memorial. I'm just thinking today, like, should maybe Colin Morikawa have taken his driver and whacked Scheffler across the back of the knee at the 16th tee? Because
that'd be entertaining.
Well, yeah, it'd be great entertaining because he wants to win. I don't know how Jack Nicklaus would have felt, but
exactly.
But that's the thing. Or if you're an NBA, the Celtics and Mavericks are playing Game 2 tonight. Like, Doncic is banged up right now. Should Jaylen Brown go out there and punch him in the face and say it was an accident? At the intent, we can injure the Mavericks' best player and have a chance to win the series. I don't know why the NHL would get that get out of jail free card. Now, other sports don't, like baseball.
It happens all the time in hockey.
If the Phillies win the World Series, should you send your pitcher out there and go beat Bryce Harper in the first at bat in the World Series?
And say you're trying to do it. That really shocked me when he said that. That was like, whoa. And nobody from the NHL,
not much blowback, right, guys?
Yeah,
there was.
You're right. It was interesting. It was interesting the how quiet the response to that was, but I think I would at least like to think that the fans aren't stupid enough to know that that's kind of not the case, and how a lot of guys go out there and play. Like, we watch it, and there's always been the conspiracy theories out there, and this guy doesn't get suspended because he plays for this team and Gary likes that owner. That's flown around for a long time. I used to do it all the time. Like, Ovi's my guy. He's been suspended, I believe, 6 times. One of those was because he skipped the All-Star game, which is stupid. But the other ones were for hits. And I would sit there and go, okay, well, my guy's getting clipped 2-3 games here for hitting a guy too hard. And Sidney Crosby can go out there and slash a guy's fingertip off and readjust Ryan O'Reilly's manhood right before the playoffs, and he doesn't get suspended. And of course, the prevailing theory there is, they can't suspend the golden boy Canadian kid. They got to suspend the evil Russian guy. And that's the type of insanity that I would subscribe to. And now, you look back on that, and like you said, Steve, you would hope that that's not the case, but I'd like both of your answers on this. In either of your time officiating at any level, I mean, I'm sure you came across a couple officials that had a bit of a, and you wouldn't blame them for it maybe in some instances, but had a bit of a personal vendetta against a certain player, maybe even a team, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'm a really, one of my many flaws, Ryan, is I'm really black and white. There's not enough gray in my world, and so as an official, I really prided myself on being able to get past that. If I didn't like somebody, that my object was still to call a game. When I refereed minor hockey in Prescott growing up, I often refereed my brother. And again, it also bothers me. I'm sure Jim's heard this too. When people say, "Well, the official's too hard on the home team because he doesn't want to look bad, because he doesn't want to show favoritism." And I want to go out there and call the best game possible. I wasn't trying to show the home team that I wasn't showing favoritism. I wasn't trying to screw the visiting team. I wasn't trying to screw Chris Clark because he and I had a fight in the parking lot the day before. I was just trying to go out there and be the best referee I could. People might call BS on that, but that's how I honestly felt. And I'm sure, knowing Jim's umpiring career, I'm sure Jim felt the same way.
I've found it's the players that seem to hold the grudges against the officials when it's just another game. It's another game to us when we go out there. We might have the same, well, especially in baseball, because at the pro level, I was 4 years in the minors, but you would have a series of 4 games, and so you had a tough call against a guy. You punched a guy out in the first game on a pitch that was 3 inches outside or something like that. Well, the next night the player's still whining about it, and you've tried to park it because you're kicking yourself. And Steve will agree with us. When we kick a call, we know we've kicked a call. Nobody needs to tell us that. We know in our own minds when that's happened. Can I just jump back to one thing? I'm just thinking about this, about what Marchand said. In the regular season, Boston would have been, it was Boston, and which series was it he said that? Boston, Florida?
Yeah.
So Boston and Florida played on a Monday. They may not see each other again for 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So what good does it do to hurt one of the Florida players, to take him out for 2 weeks or 2 games or something like that? But when you're in the playoffs, it does a heck of a lot of good, because if you can hurt him, he's out for 1, 2, 3, 4 games in that series.
Yeah. So, and Bennett did the same thing to Matthew Nyes last year.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, the one thing I will say is I think, back in my days refereeing, if you kind of know there are guys on the ice that conduct themselves with a lot of class, and there's some guys on the ice who are real idiots. And I would say that there would be times, depending on the time of a game, where the guy that was an idiot to me all the time, or the coach who was an idiot to me all the time, there was a time where I probably would ding him with an unsportsmanlike penalty, or I might call a cheap trip in the neutral zone. And the guy who treated me really well, I would give him a break on that hook in the neutral zone. Or the coach that treated me well, I would be willing to go over the bench and have a conversation with him if he wasn't very happy. And I'm sure Jim, the same thing with managers that Jim dealt with. There were some managers who he wouldn't give the time of day because they were so disrespectful, and there were managers that he would talk to and could have a pleasant conversation. And if Jim admitted he screwed up, like we all have done, the manager would probably say, "Okay, Jim," and that'd be it.
I've had it too, where a certain player has just decided he just doesn't like me, and it'd be very easy just to say, "That's it. I've heard enough from you, and you're gone." I'll go to the manager between innings and say, "You know what? You take care of him. You can hear him. Take care of him, or I'm going to take care of him." And you get a smart manager who's going to go over to that player. I still remember I was doing a university game, and Mike Lumley it was Western. And the center fielder for Western yelled in, like all the way from center field on a close pitch that I called a ball on the Mustang pitcher. I called it a ball. Might have been a strike, but I called it a ball. Center fielder's chirping at me up there. Lumley comes up out of the dugout and yells his name. He's, "Shut up! He's made less mistakes than you've made out there. You've dropped 3 fly balls." And I went, "Whoa." Because my
Perfect.
family and I always got along. So it was like, thank you.
The one thing, again, it's not that I hate officials, so don't get me wrong. I've had some run-ins with some umpires for sure. Hockey, I've been pretty good as a goalie. I don't get into it, but the abuse they take, especially hearing the hockey players, like even on open mics now when they're announcing penalties. Mm-hmm. To me, it's got to stop. But I don't know how it will ever stop, Steve. How does like you got to start calling penalties every time a guy drops an F-bomb? Like, how do you do it?
It's the one thing I've lost a lot of respect for Paul Maurice over the last two Stanley Cup playoffs, because Maurice's conduct towards officials to me is completely off base and unacceptable. And I've thought forever and ever, guys, that NHL officials take far too much abuse from players and coaches. And I wonder why the NHL Officials Association hasn't taken a stronger stance on this. And if it's something that doesn't come up, like referees do sit on the competition committee that Ryan referenced earlier. And I don't understand why players are allowed to treat officials that way. And to me, it's especially galling when you have an 18-year-old player come in the league and you have someone like, we mentioned Kevin Pollock because he's from Kincardine, or Wes McCauley, who's refereed 1,600, 1,800 games in the NHL, have been in the league for 22 years. And this 18-year-old, because he was the number 3 pick in the draft, thinks he can treat Kevin Pollock or Wes McCauley like, pardon my French, shit. And I think it's a valid concern. And Jim, I'm not sure. I mean, I covered baseball for 3 years. I don't remember it being that bad, the relationship between baseball players and managers and umpires. But and I think, guys, in minor hockey, I mean, I talk about this a lot. I don't know if I've done in this podcast, but I think minor hockey officials put up way too much. I think there should be zero tolerance in minor hockey. And I told the guys I coach with this year, I said, we will not say a word to the referees this year. I said, I'm a former referee. It's unacceptable. If we have a problem with the referees, I'll ask them to come over the bench and I'll have a conversation with them. But to me, if you're coaching a peewee game and a coach is barking at you, the first call you go over and say that I'm not going to get another word from you, and that's it for the night. And they yell one more time and they're gone. Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I've been a proponent of that for a long time, and I don't know, especially like within minor sports and local sports, I don't know how you could go about this. Chris, maybe we got to get our buddy Neil Lumsden back on here, Minister of Sport, to maybe talk about his take on this. It might have to come from like legal legislation where it's my opinion that, I mean, especially if you're a coach in minor hockey, I mean, guys, we've been in lots of arenas and ballparks and heard parents and coaches say just some wild stuff. I mean, almost worse than pro games. And it's my opinion that you should get a 2-strike rule. Like if you're abusing officials, and a lot of them are young kids now too that are going to get sick of doing it. You should be suspended for a week, and then if you do it again, you're done for the year. Like, and if it gets too bad, I think officials should be able to just call games. Like the game's over, you lose. That's my opinion.
Ryan, you just made a good point that I was going to bring up. Being involved with Baseball Ontario for so long and conducting umpire clinics and that sort of thing, we have the greatest number of young umpires that have quit after their first year. And we ask why. Well, the coaches are yelling at me, the parents are yelling at me, and I just don't like that because these are young kids.
Yeah,
like they're making mistakes out there, sure. But the players are making just as many mistakes at that age too. And so it's getting tougher and tougher. And I'm sure it is with other sports too. But I know especially in baseball, like I just retired last July. I decided 60 years of getting yelled at. I could handle the fathers, it's those mothers. But anyway, but I just decided with my age, stuff like that was a good time to go. But we have more and more of the veteran umpires that are retiring, and we're not having these young umpires coming up. And I'm sure that's happening in the other sports as well. Eventually it's going to get to the point, how are you going to play the games without these officials? There's some cities that have zero tolerance as far as spectators, parents yelling at their officials, whatever the sport is. I think that should really be mandated province-wide. You do not yell at the officials. Cheer for your own kids. Don't be yelling at the players and the other teams, and don't be especially screaming at the officials.
The Ontario Soccer Association guys, they're spending tens of thousands of dollars now to put body cams on their referees for minor soccer games. Can you imagine how that money could be better spent on developing coaches or player development or developing officials? And we're spending money because referees don't feel safe, so they have to put body cameras on them. I mean, that's just insane. And to Jim's point, in hockey, we can't recruit enough young referees right now, because, like Jim says, if a kid does try to referee, they do it for 1 year and they say, I don't need this abuse. I'll go work at Sobeys and bag groceries for $17 an hour because I'm not going to have a customer yelling at me.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Unless I'm that customer.
Exactly.
Well, Clarkey too, but.
Yeah, you never know what you're going to get with him. Although Clarkey's in a pretty good mood lately. I wonder why. I want to ask you this, Steven, and I'd love Jim's perspective on it too, because I know he's voiced a lot of thoughts on this, but it's great having you on here today to talk about this aspect as well. And we've talked about this a little bit before from the players' side of things, but since we're kind of focusing through the lens of officiating, we just saw the news that more players in Major League Baseball have gotten gambling suspensions. One of them a lifetime ban, the first one handed out in a very, very long time. And this type of stuff, when it comes to sports and gambling and in particular officials, it goes back a long way. The NBA controversies, soccer, football, it's littered with refereeing controversies. When it comes to gambling, modern day sports gambling, which has become so accessible and continues to get more accessible for more and more people south of the border, when you consider how the industry looks now, is it almost nigh impossible to prevent things like this happening from the players who get involved as well, but also the officials? Like, is the damage done? Are we just going to have to deal with stories like this more and more often, or can something still be done to curb this for the most part, do you think, Steve?
Yeah, a couple of things, Ryan. I certainly with online sports betting now, it's much easier to place a bet. So you're absolutely right about that. The one thing that has surprised me is the ignorance that players, officials, coaches seem to have around sports betting policies. But I talk to a lot of people around the industry, and they say that more education has to be done. That nobody should just assume that an NHL player doesn't understand that they can't bet, or the NFL policy, which is a little bit complicated. Like you cannot bet on sports if you're at an NFL facility, and that includes being on a team bus. So it's obvious that those people will tell you that there has to be more education of players. But guys, this has been going on forever. You mentioned Tim Donaghy, the NBA referee. What's that? 25 years ago now. I mean, the Black Sox scandal is 1919. I just think that because legal sports betting is such a hot button item now, and because since 2018, when they overturned the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the laws to make sports betting legal in the U.S., that there's just a lot more buzz around it. There's obviously a lot of advertising that people aren't happy about. But there's a lot at stake, not just for the league, but for the sports books. If there's a feeling that they're, an umpire is blowing strikes and balls because someone's going to cash in, or a hockey official doesn't call a penalty in the game because he's got money on the Oilers to win on the money line.
It's so hypocritical. I can't remember his name, but there was an Ottawa Senator player that got suspended.
Shane Pinto.
Yeah. And as he pointed out, it's on my helmet. Like the sports betting ad is right on the Ottawa Senators' helmets. And so the leagues are expecting these players not to be affected by that either. It's everywhere. That's the problem. And all young kids are betting. And as you said, Steve, the online thing, that's the danger, because you just don't know who's doing it. Anybody can do it at any time. They could be the Blue Jays could be on their tablet in the dugout putting a bet in on who's going to get a hit or stuff like that. I'm not saying that they are, but it's tempting when all that money is out there. That is so tempting, and we're just inundated on just not on the game during the games themselves with all these sports these betting ads. But we're seeing it constantly on just regular television. It's just they got to the point where they started banning like cigarette ads and stuff like that. Then they curtailed beer ads, but the betting one, because I think it's making governments so much money, they've just said, have to it, boys, go to it, without thinking of what the effects are going to be. But I think it's going to take a really big name player that we almost thought that it was going to be a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
It turned out that it wasn't. But that one raised the issue. But look how quickly it all went away because it wasn't him.
Yeah, I would just add, guys, that the players, you have to take a little bit of accountability. Like let's face it, you're stupid or you've got an addiction problem and you definitely should go get help. But if you think it's okay to be a Major League Baseball player and bet on baseball, that's dumb. And you're either dumb or you've got a problem and you need to go get help. And there are a lot of resources available now to get that help. But this is a really complicated issue, and I really don't think that getting rid of sports betting ads if you put sports betting behind a legal curtain again, this isn't going to stop it, because you're still going to have people are still going to be able to bet on their phones. There won't be any checks and balances. They'll be betting with some sports book operator on some island across the other end of the world.
And at the end of the day, the leagues are just going to keep monitoring it, suspend players when they do, because it's all about the mighty buck. Like, there's no question about it. You guys both remember, and I don't know if Ryan does, but like, remember the day where the NHL wasn't allowed on Sports Line or whatever it's called? What's the government one called? Pro Line. They wouldn't. It was the NBA, right?
Yeah,
and they didn't want the Raptors involved. Did it have to come off when the Raptors got
one of the conditions on Toronto getting NBA franchise was that you couldn't have NBA games on Pro Line.
Yeah. Crazy, crazy. But it's all about the mighty buck, no doubt about it.
But the leagues themselves are making millions off of this.
That's what I mean.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're right in bed.
That's the hypocritical thing about it. They're going to suspend their players when they themselves are just as guilty.
But
Go ahead, Clarkey.
Just some of the things I witnessed when I was managing a girls. No, it was competitive. It was rep softball.
Yes.
But I would see, like, in provincial championships, other managers, believe me, it wasn't me, get so mad at the umps, they would follow them to their little room afterwards, and they were pounding on the door. They had to get cops there. Like, just crazy stuff happening at games. And like, I only got ejected once. I've told the story before. I didn't think I should have for what I did. I did a lot worse, but I was also put in my place a lot. And when I was put in my place, I shut up. And that's what it comes down to, where you talk about abuse and give a guy a warning. And I stopped. Like, it was provincials. I didn't want to, get ejected. And I was riding someone a little hard, but he called me over and he said, "That's it. One more and you're gone." And I stopped, but I just wanted to relay that story. Like, I'll never forget some of the things that happened. Like, I remember the wins, the losses, but I also remember the pounding on the door. It was a team from Napanee. I'll never forget it. It was a team from Napanee, and they were going nuts after a game, trying to get at
Maybe they were just upset that the in-house DJ wasn't playing enough Avril Lavigne. That could have been it too.
Maybe, or that we beat them. Maybe.
Yeah, Clarkey, the worst one for me is for a couple of summers, I refereed ball hockey in Toronto, and I was refereeing a championship game at York University one night at the old arena there with another guy, Andre Fotu, who was he and I were both refereeing the OHA at the time. And after the game, the captain from the losing team came over and grabbed the trophy out of the convener's hands and smashed it on the floor. And then we had their dads and girlfriends and brothers and sisters waiting for us at the door when Andre and I were trying to leave the rink. And I said to Andre, if we need a police escort Andre to get out of a ball hockey game, the world's gone completely back crap. And these people followed us right out to the car, and nothing happened. But I thought that this is nuts. Like, this is recreational ball hockey,
Yeah.
And I'm getting followed to my car.
It is crazy. I remember specifically.
I could top those.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm
go
sure.
ahead, Jim.
Reading,
Please, Jim.
Pennsylvania, 1975, AA Eastern League. Some fan was chirping at me, and I think I could say this on here. I said, "Hey, is your wife here at the game?" And he goes, "No, why?" I said, "Well, there's a couple of baseball players missing. You better go home and check on her." And well, anyway, a cop comes in, knocks on the door after the game, or there's a knock on the door. I open it up, and there's a police officer, and he says, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Okay." And he says, "You're the base umpire. You made the comment to a fan." I said, "Yeah." And so he repeated what he was told by this fan. I said, "Officer." I said, "Come on now. I'm a professional baseball umpire. When I say something like that," he says, "That's what I figured." So he goes to the door. He goes to close it. Then he sticks his head back in and says, "Great line, though." But anyway, to finish the story, remember, this is the United States. And I don't know how this fan knew it, but wasn't my car because my partner was the driver. We get to the car, and there's a bullet hole in the driver's door. So we had to call the cops about that. Like, oh my God,
my goodness! The only time
I'm glad the guy didn't pull his gun out there right at the game and shoot me.
Oh my God!
And you wonder why they have metal detectors now in all these buildings.
That happened in Colombia. Remember that soccer keeper that got killed? Yep.
Yeah. Well, there was a player in one of those countries that shot a referee.
Like, yes, a referee was shot.
Let's not even talk about this stuff.
But I think this is the lengths it can go to sometimes. It's really sad.
I will say this, my last little story. I really feel this one time I was completely screwed. It was no, listen to this story. Okay.
It was 1993. I was coaching Toronto Maple Leafs.
Shut up. No. I wasn't playing in that game, but they got screwed. So I was I was managing the Mississauga Southwest Hurricanes. We were playing the Mississauga North Tigers. There was a tremendous rivalry. The game was in Mississauga North, and the convener for Mississauga North was not a fan of me, and I wasn't a fan of his. And it was all Mississauga North umpires doing the game. And someone tipped me off that I better be careful because this one base umpire was out to get me. Well, I kept quiet. I didn't do anything throughout the whole game. Then there was a ground ball, and the runner running from first to second, it hit her, like completely hit her and went the other way. The manager who was managing the other team was at third base. He started walking off the field. He knew the inning was over. The umpire didn't call it. So I go out to him and I go, like, "Did you not see the ball hit the girl?" "Nope, didn't hit her." I go, "Can you ask your home plate umpire, please, for a second opinion?" "Nope, didn't hit her." Wouldn't get another opinion. And I should have probably blown up and got kicked out of that game, but I didn't. I just shook my head and said, well, this is what they were warning me about. And it was just so blatant that it looked like the guy was actually waiting to screw me over, and he did.
Hey, Ryan, just quickly, because your listenership is Bruce and Gray and Huron counties. I do have a good Clark Pollock story to tell. And we're in Durham one night for an intermediate A game, and Clark had a bit of a running feud with the Harrison Blues. We'd had done quite a few games this particular season, and they were pushing the line, crossing the line with Clark, and it kind of blew up in Durham one night. So Clark gave some guy a misconduct and went over, skated to the bench and said, "Okay, who wants to go next?" And some guy says, "Oh, Pollock, you're a blankety blankety blank." And he says, Okay, Jim, you're gone. Who wants to go next?" And by the time Clark was done, I think he'd thrown 2 coaches, a trainer, and 7 players out.
Wow.
And that's one of those examples where things things got out of hand a little bit. But Clark Pollock was a highly respected referee, and 99% of the guys, and Jim knows Clark because Clark did a lot of games down in the London area back in the day. And And Clark was a player. Clark was a player's referee. And if you talk to anybody I run into today that played with Clark referee, that's the first thing they'll say is Clark always had my back. But that was a night where a team crossed the line and they really paid the price.
Now, does anyone know, like, I hate to bring this up if no one knows the answer. Maybe we can bring on our buddy Bruce Barker, but something happened in the Guelph Royal Toronto Maple Leaf game the other day.
Oh,
Does anyone know?
I didn't see that.
No, okay. Well, I'm gonna get that.
I'll get
story.
the lowdown.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the lowdown.
Mark, yeah,
because the manager today issued a statement. The Guelph Royals manager issued a statement apologizing to the fans and the players and everything. But it was a complete shit show.
I wonder if the umpire used Jim Cressman's line on the manager.
Yeah.
Exactly. Maybe Jim Cressman was the umpire.
Yeah.
Came out of retirement for one night.
You got time for one quick story?
Yeah.
100%.
Anyway, I wasn't doing the game, but it was in London. Stratford was in London, the London Majors.
Lean back.
You got to adjust your phone, back. Though.
We can't see
What's
you.
that?
We can't see
you.
Oh,
sorry. I leaned
there
back.
we go.
Cutting your head off. There we go.
Sorry about that.
We want your whole head in the story.
So anyway, Joe Sarator was working the plate. John Weigel was umpiring third base, and the visiting team, the Hillers or whatever they were back then, was in the third base dugout. And they weren't happy with Joe's strike zone, so they were chirping him from the dugout. So Joe goes to John between innings and said, "Can you see who it is that's chirping me in the dugout?" He said, I can't figure out who it is, but somebody's just on my butt in there, and I want to get him. Wags, that's what we call Joe Weigel, says, "Leave it with me." Anyway, halfway through the next batter, all of a sudden, Wags runs over to the dugout. You're gone. You're gone. You're gone. He threw about 8 guys out. And he says, Wags, and then Wags yells back at Joe Sartor, says, "Joe, I don't know who it was either, but I'm sure I got him."
Well, it's better than Aaron Boone getting kicked out for a fan yelling.
Oh, that was a dynamite one. That was dynamite. That was just good entertainment. I love.
You know what? That. Aaron Boone deserves it. You talk about Paul Maurice, but Steve talked about Paul Maurice. Aaron Boone is the biggest whiner.
Hey, Sheldon Keefe was too, I heard.
What's that?
Well,
I said Sheldon Keefe was too.
Oh, okay. But Aaron Boone, you can see it because he's always yelling.
Yeah.
Like he's always. Yeah.
Do you guys think that the officials should face the media, or at least somebody, after games and answer questions? Steve?
Well, they can. There could be if there's a question, they can send a message.
They have a
down.
pool reporter. I think Chris means in front of the gathered masses.
Oh, I gotcha. That because the problem is you're going to get these sportscasters and sports writers who know nothing about the rules, but they think they do. Fuck Martinez. And it's just going to become a free for all because an umpire is going to have to sit there and try to explain a rule that people are going to have no, that's not the rule.
Or you get Brian Lewis in front of everyone trying to justify something that
would be exciting.
Wouldn't that be something, Steve?
Well, yeah, I would say I would like to see the pool report done used more often because I think it is hard to put referees in there. Then you get into, they probably should have some media coaching. Some guys might be comfortable, some guys might not. The NHL is a lot more vanilla than it used to be. I mean, there used to be a lot of characters in the game. It'd be fun back in the day to get Bill Friday or Vern Buffy or some of those guys to get up and talk to a bunch of reporters. Even a few years ago, got guys like trying to remember Stewart's first name, but Bill. And Dvorsky would have been fun. Would have been fun too, Paul Dvorsky. But I think it'd be nice to see pool reporters used more often, Chris. But good luck with that. I mean, we live in an age now where they're restricting access. Like access is harder than ever with players, coaches. I mean, it's the media is so tight, or the media is so tightly managed now. I mean, it's light years ahead of where it was back in the 80s and 90s when 3 of the 4 of us were doing a lot of work at press boxes and arenas and stadiums.
Yeah, it's certainly changed. That's for sure. Well, Clarkey, I've got my hat on. You know what that means. We're nearly out of time here. And I'd like for these two to join in on this. And it's our favorite segment, right? Okay. It's the Conway Furniture Couch Potato of the Week. For those who don't know where that is, our friend Phil Main can tell you.
Conway Furniture, Highway 86, just east of Listowel.
That's right. Highway 86, east end of Listowel. It's very easy to find. Conway Furniture. The best part about them, when you go in there, the price on everything, there's no fooling around. There's no confusion, okay? Like when a ref makes a bad call maybe and there's a little confusion, you don't get that at Conway Furniture because everything in there, the price includes HST and delivery. And we usually do this ourselves, Clarkey. We name a couch potato, and I would like to start this time, and I just want to name all of our young officials out there who are coming up as my couch potato of the week. Keep at it. We need you guys, and everybody has got to tone it down at these games in minor sports, man. Hockey, I'm looking at you really close, but baseball's just as bad. Soccer with the webcam, like, come on, we got body cams on soccer referees at like U11 games. Kids can't even free kick. Like, come on here. What are we doing? Teach your kid how to free kick. My couch potato is all of our young officials. We need you. We got to do more to support them and help them stick through it because we're going to run out of a lot of officials, man. We're already doing it. There, you see releases every year in the paper. This minor hockey association doesn't have refs. It's unreal. Yeah. And Clarkey, why don't you follow up?
I'm going to, and I'm going to name a young lady named Mel Zegman as my couch potato of the week. Now, you guys won't have any idea who Mel is. Mel's a young girl who I used to coach when I was coaching softball. Her dad, Ed, and I coached many, many years together. And Ed coached Jenna, my daughter, in her first year of ball. And Ed was also a big umpire with Mississauga. Sadly lost his life to cancer, oh boy, maybe 5 years ago. And Mel got married a couple weeks ago, and congratulations to her and her husband, Bronco.
Yes.
So it's not really his name. He's just a Denver Bronco fan, and I call him Bronco. Okay. So to Mel and Bronco, congratulations. You are my couch potato of the week. And the neatest thing about it was my daughter was the maid of honor, and another ball player who I coached was also in the wedding party. So like those are lifelong friendships that you get when you're a young ball player, and it was just neat to see some of the old ball players there at the wedding. So Mel, you're my couch potato of the week.
There you go.
Yeah, hey guys, just quickly on that. I mean, we've spent a lot of this podcast kind of airing our grievances and griping a bit about officials, but I will say, and I'm sure I speak for Jim as well, I have so many great memories as an official, and the people that allowed me to meet and how it helped me along the way in my journalism career. And I think I've talked about Clark Pollock a few times on this podcast. And I mean, Clark was so good to me when I came to Kincardine in 1981, and because of Clark, I had a chance to work some Sutherland Cups and the Allen Cup and the Hardy Cup, and because of Clark's mentorship, eventually got me to an NHL development camp and allowed me to work a couple of AHL exhibition games. So officiating has given me an awful lot of joy and allowed me to meet a lot of good people. So kind of like to leave the podcast on a good note about the good things that happen through officiating.
For sure.
100%. Clark is your couch potato then, Mr. McAllister. That's safe to say that. Jim, why don't you round this off? Do you have anybody in mind that you'd like to shout out?
Well, here's one that's going to come right out of left field, but Clarkey will kind of understand this one. I am now having the pleasure of serving on the board of the Blythe Festival Theater. And I can say we now. I used to be a patron. I ran into Clarkey there at a show one day, and I thought, what the heck are you doing here? And he kind of said the same thing. I said, well, I love theater. I think he had free tickets from the radio station.
For sure.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or he got mixed up.
Too. Worst show ever, too.
He thought he was a cowbell, Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I want to make my couch potato. Gil Garrett, the current artistic director, has been there. I think it's 10 years now.
Gil's been around.
This is our 50th season, And it's still the little gem that so many people have not discovered. It's nothing but Canadian plays. A lot of them are brand new plays. I might get in trouble for saying this because I don't think it's been announced yet, but Emma Donoghue, the great writer, who is actually living in, she won it was an Oscar for, I can't remember what the movie was now. The Room, was it? No. Anyway, but Emma lives in London now, and she approached Gil about writing a play for the 2025 season for the Blythe Festival. But anyway, this is the 50th season, and there's a family out there that is matching until I think it's the end of July. Any donations up to $250,000, they will match that $250,000. So if you got an extra $10, $100, $1,000, and you want to donate it to something, Blythe Festival. So Gil Garrett, the Blythe Festival is my couch potato.
Nice.
There
Just tell Gil not to do Dumbo again, please.
Okay, Chris. Well, if we want to lean on, cultural suggestions,
that was just
we'll
not a good
turn
one
to you.
That was not a good play. You can even ask Jim. He saw the first half.
Okay. Well, we are talking to a guy who eats like lettuce and mayo on his sub, so we're gonna stick to our own cultural takes, okay, buddy?
Hey, and if you guys looking for a vehicle, come and see me. Okay.
Larry Hudson, ladies and gentlemen,
Hudson's has it. 40th anniversary sale going on right now. A lot
of deals,
some contests, everything going on. Lots of
deals
trucks.
Are hot.
I think Steve, you need a Yukon or something. So come on down and Hudson's.
Come on up or come on over.
Come on over. Yeah,
Hudson's has it. Come from anywhere. Hudson's has it. The deals are hot. Ladies and gentlemen, we really appreciate our friend Steve McAllister and Jim Cressman for joining us tonight. Remember, you can watch the show Friday nights at 8, Sunday nights at 9 with our friends on Whiteman TV. That's channel 6. For Whiteman subscribers, we debut on our YouTube channel Friday nights at 9. Make sure to follow us on social media for all the great clips from the show at Instigating Pod. You can find the podcast on all your favorite podcast apps. I'm Drury. That's Clarkey. This has been Instigating. We'll be back next week.